I think I'll move forward to Dr. Kwok Yesung, who had written very well on, he had done a good research about this May 13, right? And I think I hope he would probably discuss a little bit about this Tanda Putra. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Farouk. Yeah, looking at the propaganda for this afternoon's event, I was very heartened to read about the tagline that says, Malaysia is ready. Yeah, Malaysia is ready. I remember the 80s when I was an angry young man, and I used to write a lot. But I was under Operation Lalang. I was taken in under the ISA, and when the police officer gave me the 2-year order to go to Kamunting, he said, "Oh, Kwa, sorry lah. I've read your stuff. I agree with you 100%. But you know, Malaysia is not ready for your kind of ideas." In 1987. And then when Dr. Farouk mentioned this recent racism, I also remember in 1986, when the past leaders approached the Chinese educationists, at the time it was Mr. Sim and Mr. Lim, and had a dialogue in the offices of the Chinese educationists. And they said, you know, the first party or organization in Malaysia to say that discrimination on the basis of race is against Islam. And that was, you know, the papers as we know today went berserk, you know, even to the extent I used to document it in one book on Media Watch, in which even some of the famous press said that even the dialogue that was held at the Chinese Assembly Hall biasanya digunakan untuk hidangan babi dan minuman keras. You know, things like that. It was all over the place, but anyway, it's all documented. But that shows that we haven't moved very far all these years. After what Chi Wee, president of the Bar Council, has said, I think nobody objects to ratifying the ICRD, you know, just as we have ratified the CEDAW and the other conventions. But, you know, that's something that is in the back burner. We hope we can do it now, you know, with the online petitions and all that, we go on for it. But the next thing is that the general elections is just around the corner, you know, and on the 6th of March, the coalition of Malaysian NGOs are having a launching of the 13th general election demands. And one of which is the calling for the abolition of institutionalized racism. So this is something to show that there is something more pressing, you know, that we can do. I think that we can do at this election. I think I was just reading the online press just now. Professor Terence Gomez was saying that up to now, Barisan Nasional and Pakatan Rakyat, both coalitions haven't actually come out to say what they want to do with the new economic policy. I know some of the lesser leaders like Chua Ju-meng and all say, oh yes, when we come into power, we will abolish the new economic policy. But is what Chua Ju-meng says binding on the Pakatan Rakyat? You know, so I know we have lived the Barisan Nasional for 55 years or more. But now there is a chance of a takeover, if you like, you know. But what is the new coalition? Has the new coalition promised anything to do with the new economic policy? So these are very concrete demands that we can hope for, that a coalition of NGOs can hope for. Because the new economic policy, as Chi Wee had put forward just now, the question of affirmative action If you look at the question of affirmative action at the time of independence in 1957, which is enshrined in Article 153, that is one thing. Okay. Exactly how it was supposed to be implemented, people like my generation, we lived through it, we still know what it was like. And it was only after the, what I call the pogrom of May 13, that the new economic policy was implemented in 1971 under the new economic policy. And that is why I feel that I have very strong feelings about May 13 and what it actually represents. The truth of May 13, of course, as Tanda Putra, the new film, has tried to portray, is something that I believe can only be realized when there's a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in this country. When we open the commission to all the people who are affected by May 13, the victims, the people in the police, the people in the hospitals, the people in the army, the people in the Red Cross, the journalists, local and foreign, etc. I think that has to be done. And until then, there is no such thing as the truth. The truth is not according to what I wrote in my book. That's not the truth. That's not the whole truth. Nor is it what the Barisan Nasional and I believe the new film is trying to do. To tell them that that is the truth. Some people have urinated to the flagpole of the Menteri Besar, etc. I don't believe that happened. If there is, I would like to see documentary evidence of that. But the thing is, whatever happens, we know that through the years, every time a general election arises, the government never fails to put on. It's not only May 13, it's also Bukit Kapong. No? The film of Bukit Kapong comes on the television without fail every general election. And until Mat Sabu raised the question of Mat Indra, nobody knew that from watching the film there was any Malays involved in the assault of Bukit Kapong police station. You know? So these are things that the truth of these events in history, Malaysian history, can only come about when you have a real Truth and Reconciliation Committee. I think we should have, if we want to move forward. And it looks as if the consensus, looking at the one Malaysia this, one Malaysia that there is a consensus that we should move ahead. And that is why I'm very heartened to see that the publicity for this event says that Malaysia is ready to say no to racism. And for years, this propaganda since May 13 has been played by UMNO youth. And I think that the tipping point was when Chris Shammuddin raised the Chris in the open TV in front of everybody. I think media watchers have noted this through the years in UMNO Youth General Assembly, but it was a shock to many people because it was in broad daylight, in live television, when Chris Shammuddin raised his Chris. And I think that was the beginning of the end of UMNO Youth and their macho kind of image about, Bumiputra-ism. And so this question of the hero of the Malays is now being outsourced to groups like Perkasa and emerging heroes like Ridwan and others. And I hope that with ICRD, with the new Equality Act that Chi Wee talks about, because we already have a Human Rights Commission, what has happened in Britain is that they have merged the Human Rights Commission with the Equality Commission, which is the Equality and Human Rights Commission. So it is not difficult to marry Suhakam with a new equality portion of the commission. And so that can deal with hate speeches, hate crimes, etc. But I would not be very sanguine about the National Harmony Act and the so-called Race Relations Act, which was raised first, which I'm very surprised about, because the people in the Attorney General office know that in Britain it's already been jettisoned in favor of the Equality Act. But I also know that if somebody like me can be detained under the ISA for being a threat to national security, for writing my book on the root causes of polarization in Malaysia, for challenging the question of the division of people into Bumiputras and non-Bumiputras, then there's no reason why a National Harmony Act or a Race Relations Act can't be used against people like me. And to treat people like people in Perkasa and Ridwan as the goodies, and we'll be the baddies. So it goes on. So a proper Equality and Human Rights Commission has to be set up in such a way that its integrity, its independence can be seen. And I've always mentioned enough, I think I was at Bar Council seminar recently, when I said that we often assume that the social contract talks about, revolves around 1957, and it's about Article 153. But the question of Bumiputraism actually started beyond that. After the May 13 riots in 1967, Amendment 8A was introduced into the Constitution, Article 153. So, that was introduced, that amendment was introduced during a time of emergency, of national emergency. Many people in the new generation don't realize this. Should not we look at it again? So when we're talking about the social contract, what are we looking at? Are we looking at 153 without 8A? We're looking at concepts of Bumiputraism. Do we see that in the 1957 Constitution? We do not. Do we see the question of Ketuanan Melayu in the Constitution? We do not. That again is a new concept that came out, as far as I can document, in 1986 in Singapore, when Abdullah Ahmad spoke in Singapore and introduced this question of Ketuanan Melayu. Meaning, don't mess about with us. If you know who are the boss, don't ever challenge so-called Malay power. And that is where the question of Ketuanan Melayu comes in. And of course, in recent years, there's an attempt at rehabilitating this concept by some of our academics to say that it's actually not about overlordship of Malays, which I'm sure the ICERD will see that as a question of, that will come under Article, just blatant racism really, a question of overlordship of a race against another. It just won't pass the ICRD or an Equality Act. And so I think these are things that we need to be careful about. And beyond the ICRD, which we all agree to, I think we should think about what demands we'd like to put to the political parties, the two coalitions, at the next general election pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kwar. Yeah, I guess it's important for us to understand as well that as closer we get to the next generation, we see a lot more of these racist remarks and things like that. Because I think what the current government is trying to do is to stoke, this fear, politics of fear, that the Malays is going to lose their political power to other races. And then, because of that, we'll see a lot of these racist remarks again and again, more and more when it gets closer to the general election. Because this is the idea that they can implant, especially on the rural areas, in the Malays in the rural areas, that the Malays, they are going to lose their political power, right? The demise of the end means the end of the Malays' political power, is the end of it. Yeah, I think I'll allow Dr. KJ John, Director of OMSI, Oriental Minds and Hearts Institute to say a few words. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. First, thank the organizers for inviting so many of us. And I'm pleased to recognize that we're all civil society, some kind of change agents. We all have our own ambitions of what we're trying to achieve. Very often we stumble and fall, and when Ambiga was holding there on behalf of all of us, we cheer her. But we forgot to go and show our butts as well to oppose the other side. So anyway, we are not perfect human beings. We participate because we believe in this country. I really do. I was trained in Royal Military College when in the days before the Ridwanti types reached there. And we were trained to be one Malaysians. And I tell you how sincere the training was. I drove in with a friend on May 12, 1969, into KL. I was in a car driven by a guy called Malik Natarajan. Many of you may know him. And now famous Judge Arif was in the car with me. He's my classmate from Tenawan. We were coming to University Malaya. And we saw the demonstration of some of the photographs that are in Kwok Kia Song's book and others. We reached University Malaya. Next day, we were all called into a meeting and said, all of you freshies, line up, go to University Hospital by the back, and please donate blood. We didn't know what was happening. There was a blackout in terms of media. Those days, no social networks, no media, no internet, no cell phones. So we all marched behind Clinical Student Hostel too. And we all donated blood. I remember the young interns, 3 tahun baru, medical school, pacak sampai 5 kali tak kena. Until today, I feel like I'm going to faint when I donate blood because that's psychological trauma. But I remember a month after that, suddenly in First College, University Malaya, people were breaking into racial groups. I said, what? I mean, I didn't recognize it as racial. I go to this group, I hear some kind of talk. I could all go to all groups because nobody saw me as a threat for some reason. Then I went to the other group, they talk about something else. I went to the third group. Then I started thinking, who am I? I suddenly realized I cannot participate in the content of their conversations, and yet I'm a Malaysian, and they're Malaysians. So, this is a true story. 18 of us RMC old boys who happened to be in First College decided to form our own, hockey stick brigade to protect the college. We said, let them get into their sob stories. We will protect our interests because we were told that people from Kampung Kerinci might come and attack the college because people are there. Anyway, that was the day I woke up and realized, after all, I am a Malaysian Indian and not a Malaysian. So I tell you how racist we are. I wrote a column in Malaysia Kini saying I'm not an Indian, I'm a Malaysian. And I got 103 comments from Indians, the large majority scolding me because I say I'm not Indian. And all I did was in the article argued that Indianness is a nationality, not a racial classification. And Malaysianness is the nationality. And Malayness can be claimed to be a nationality, but it only can be limited to Persekutuan Tanah Melayu. That's the only Malay. You cannot tell Sabahans and Sarawakans or Indonesians that they are Malays. They get upset, some of them. There are some Malays, from Sungai Melayu in Sumatra, which is the root source of the heritage of the Malays. Now let me carry on with the slide I've prepared, and after this I'll stick to the slides. To develop my proposal, and I'm using the phrase one Bangsa Malaysia. I know I get wallop for using this also because the word number one is there, they don't like it. You know who doesn't like it. Okay? Other people like it, but some people don't like it. I call it one Bangsa Malaysia. Why? I'm a peacemaker. I'm trained to be a peacemaker. I like to be a peacemaker, although I get wallop all the time. One Bangsa Malaysia is how I frame it, and I'm calling it my proposal. To develop my proposal about One Bangsa Malaysia, I asked 3 questions which need answers. What is truth if man can know truth? Secondly, who or what is the custodian of all such truths? Scientists, ulamas, lawyers, or everyone who chooses to live lives that honor God? Thirdly, how then can we demonstrate all such truths in our lives? Is it not by showing love both for God and other human beings we call neighbors? My answer to these 3 questions guide all my thinking as I ask myself this question. Therefore, I propose One Bangsa Malaysia for a multi-ethnic Malaysia and an agenda for national integration with constitutional integrity, which is the sub-theme. Now, why truth matters? Often, man takes a dual view of time, space, and all reality, which we call the here and now and the hereafter. Di sini dan di akhirat. Okay, I mean, both time frames, okay? I would like to add a third dimension of spiritual and organic maturity. For instance, if you ask a child, what do you want to do now? The answer permanently is, I want to play. I have I won't say our oldest son, you will know who it is. But my wife recently asked him, if you have a choice, what would you like to do all day? He said, I would like to play basketball the whole day. Mom gave up on him, okay? That is maturity or lack of maturity, okay? And that's the third dimension. Often we compare, Malaysia is a half democracy, America is a full democracy. We're talking about maturity models. And if we don't make the distinction, we equate 1 equals 1 or 1 plus 1 equals 2. But we all know 1 plus 1 could equal 11. And the mathematicians among us can agree with me. If you say the one number has a base of 10, the other is just plus 1 and is 11. Okay, I see some mathematicians nodding their heads, okay? So, we need to understand that all text is given in a context. And if you take the text out of the context, we don't know the meaning of what's being said. Let me give an example. And here I do it respectfully, recognizing Marina is here and I see Dr. Mahathir's name there. Okay? Recently, when the RCI issues came out, and our former Prime Minister admitted that yes, they gave some citizenship to Muslims from the Philippines. And there was hue and cry over it, and he said, well, Tunku also gave 1 million citizenship. In my language, that's text out of context. Because when the 1957 was negotiated, not just with the British, with the Sultans as well, and the alliance, that was part of the brokerage, because the British brought the Indians and the Chinese into the country and they can't just abandon them. Otherwise, 1 million of them, Indians, Chinese, and how many million today, would have gone like Indra to England to say, Queen, please pay us our pension. Okay, please understand history and context. Next. Najib's government has inherited many legacy problems that from the past administrations of the nation state. And I've worked 31 years in public service before I retired in 2004. My first appointment was in Prime Minister's department. I reported to a big man called Tunku Tan Sri Shariman, was my big boss. I walked into the office, he said, John, you must be from RMC. I said, sir, how did you know that? He said, you just marched into the room. And then on his table was written, don't give me problems, just solutions. So we nicknamed him Bulldog. Okay. One day when I found enough courage, I presented a simple idea paper to Tan Sri and said, this is my idea about NEP and why I don't think NEP will be implemented. This is 1973, mind you. And I said, just by attrition rate alone, you won't achieve. Your target is 30%. Let's say the efficient systems are not so efficient. 5% shortfall every year, you won't hit 30%. So why don't we put the target of 45% so we hit 30%? I mean, simple logic. But of course, nobody took me seriously. And then we've been mucking around with the figures to prove that we're still not achieved 30%. When a researcher like Dr. Lim Teck Gee says we have already achieved 45%. I'm not going to get into the debate, I'm just stating the facts. So how do we move forward with this problem that's facing the country? I believe our home is cracked with a lot of fractures. Our house, we call Malaysia, has got a lot of fractures and fissures. Some are in the ground. How do we improve? I believe the way forward, whatever label we use to describe it, is through actions based on political will. And that's why I agree with both all the three earlier speakers. We have to hold the new governments, regardless of who is in power. It doesn't matter who comes to power. We have to hold them responsible, address real problems in real ways. And I'm telling you, with 31 years of public service experiences, we are sitting in a club for which the government gave 20 million ringgit and called it Club Rekreasi Perkhidmatan Awam. But today it's called Club Golf Perkhidmatan Awam. I wonder if the unions knew that they were shortchanged. Think about it. We've been doing this all along. All along we've been doing this. Okay? And we've labeled it all kinds of things. So we must find the political will and act. Next. Our nation-state architecture is a very big thesis, was put together by a lady called Tricia Yeo in the Merdeka Statement and was handed over to Tan Sri Bernard Dompo. It shows the fractures and fractures in this nation we call Malaysia. And I'm telling you, our house will collapse if we all don't begin to build up the institutions that hold it up. Our house will collapse if we all don't build up the institutions that hold it up. Next. What is the framework for moving forward? I have a pet theory. I call it Theory R. Okay? I have a pet theory about human agency and responsibility, which calls all of us to hold one common worldview. People will say it's impossible. But if you don't have a common vision, how can we be in the same car going in that direction? We want to be in 10 different cars going in 10 different directions. We can't be in the same car going the same direction, or whatever you call it. You can call it a ship, like a Titanic going towards the iceberg. I'm warning that we're going towards the iceberg. But can we steer the ship away? The captain alone can't do it. All of us must steer the ship away. All of us through our small actions, not big actions. Don't wait for the new government tomorrow, day after tomorrow to suddenly change everything. Nothing's going to change. 31 years in public service, I guarantee you nothing will change. Okay? But if we stay united and become what Rajapetra calls the third force, or a force negotiating for change without being partisan. So I agree with Dato' Ambika when she says she's not going to stand. I like that statement because I've always said I'm not standing for any party or any elections. I just want to be responsible, holding any government coming up responsible for what they promise. They must deliver, otherwise we have to bring them down again. May take another 5 years, but bring them down. Whoever it is, doesn't matter. So, what is this? This is the most important part of mine. Sorry, go back one. Okay. Okay, no, sorry, go to the next page, sorry. The one with implications of One Bangsa Malaysia. So what is this common mindset? I call it the 5 onion layers of multiple identities. What is the first, highest level of identity? I can see some foreigners in our midst, just by looks, right? But if you're a Malaysian, we will all have a Malaysian passport. All Malaysians travel on a Malaysian passport. Even Ridwan T or Ibrahim Ali have to use a Malaysian passport. or even Muhyiddin, Tan Sri Muhyiddin. Whatever he says, he doesn't have a Tanah Melayu passport, okay? He wears a Malaysian passport. That's our primary identity. And the only reason we can sign the ICERD is because we have that passport. Second, all of us have a religious heritage. All of us. It's just a matter of identifying the heritage and recognizing, and if we are interested, we can study and understand that heritage of the other person. Fairly easy to do. Thirdly, we all have diverse ethnic and cultural practices or ways of living. I always say this, by heritage, I'm an ethnic Malayali, which means my parents came from the state of Kerala. And the Malayalis have one meal that's unique to Malayalis called avial. Okay, and that's unique to Malayalis. All Malayali males especially love their mother's cooking of avial. That's their mother tongue taste. Why do we call it mother tongue and not father tongue? It starts with the basic feeding that we start with the mother's tongue. Okay, breast. So we all have an ethnic heritage. We need to be proud. There's nothing to apologize for a heritage. We should be proud of it. Fifthly, we all have personality types. I am an A type, my wife is a B type, using some personality profile. Okay, and you understand the difference. The B type is a quiet person who listens and doesn't talk as much, and then when they speak, they do explode once in a while. Okay, I know, I am describing my wife. She says I explode all the time. Finally, all of us as human beings are distinguished from animals, which means we have a human conscience. Nobody should come and tell me an animal has human conscience. Animal doesn't. And I'm talking about the lower animals. We have a human conscience and we must exercise our conscience for the sake of this nation. So I conclude with this one statement. There is only one race in the world, the human race. While media has another race called the amazing race. I'm not talking about that. But there are many ethnicities in the world. When I went to Jakarta, first time I went to Jakarta, I visited what's called Jakarta in miniature. They had more than 60 or 70 ethnic cultural exhibitions. Then it hit me, only one was Malay culture. The rest were other ethnic, and they say they have more than 300 ethnicities in Indonesia alone. And then the Sabah and Sarawak tell me they each have 30 or 40 ethnicities. So I think we should go against racism, but for ethnicity. Against racism means stereotyping and treating the other as lesser than you. Any racist ideology. Ketuhanan Melayu is a racist ideology. It will never get past ICERD. Any kind of, even when you say, sorry, I'm not picking on Hindra, but when they say they want rights for Indian, again it's racism. I'm sorry, it is. Because they're only talking about Indians. What about the Orang Asli? Why don't you also fight for, they've also been forgotten for 40, 50 years. Go to Orang Asli villages and you will know, or go to Sabah, Sarawak and you will know. They've been discriminated too. Let's fight for them too. So, with that, I'd like to end, and I really appreciate all of you taking a Saturday afternoon off coming, because we are the third force of this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. KJ John. Dr. KJ John pointed out a very important point, pertinent point just now, that there's only a single race, the race of humanity. And I would like to quote again a saying by the fourth caliph if you understand about the Islamic political history, then you understand that the successor of the Prophet, there were four main successors. So the fourth was Ali bin Abi Talib, or known as Imam Ali bin Abi Talib. He said, we are either brothers in faith, we are all either brothers in faith or equals in humanity. And I think that is very profound statement by Imam Ali.